So, thank you for joining us to the practical path to your new business model. And first, I have to say I'm very honored that we have a very strong and senior panel here. But I've been told as a moderator, I should make my life easier to stay ahead of the moderation and the discussion. So I will ask all of my panelists to introduce themselves just quickly so you know where everybody is sitting. We have in the middle Elaina from Austin Energy, the local. Next to me is Cris, Eugster. Is that right?
Very nice and pronounced.
Ah, thank you. San Antonio, right?
Yes.
Good, so not that far away. Then we're moving a bit further out. We have Jesson Bradshaw from Houston. And then from far, far away, Essen, Germany, Klaus Grellmann from innogy. And I'll ask again all of them to introduce them briefly to all of you. One other remark I would like to make, what you can see here, we removed all the tables and we would have wished for a bit more openness space here. So we will all ask you to be a part of our discussion. And that's what I asked my panelists as well. We want to have an open and interactive discussion here. And not preaching to you what we think is right. So, my name is Oliver Riedel. I'm a Managing Director for Energy Consulting America. We're a management consulting company supporting energy leaders through the transition and the upcoming energy future and disruption of the energy future here. And I'm very happy to host that panel. And please, again, let's have a lively discussion. So, what is that all about? Let's talk a bit about the utility landscape. What is business model innovation and why do we need it? Why don't we just stay where we are? We have shaped our industry for the last 30, 40 years, and what's so wrong about that? And where and how is disruption happening and what do we need to do for or against it? And that's our part here. And not only on a theoretical basis, but we really have 4 panelists here who have practical experience with that. So what can we do to make the business model change happen? And what might be roadblocks in that? So I'll start with the lady, Elaine. Can you shortly introduce yourself and let us know how you see business model innovation and maybe where you've seen with your company or with other companies business model innovation?
Well, hi there. I'm Elaina. I'm Chief Operating Officer for the utility here in Austin, Texas, Austin Energy. I'm responsible for generation, transmission, distribution, market operations, IT. My boss is in the audience. I guess that was her sick joke. She gave me IT. Now, we are a vertically integrated utility situated here in ERCOT and have a lot of interesting challenges, not only market as well as our aspirational environmental goals. So it's interesting, you know, all these buzzwords get thrown around, IoT, GOT, I like that, those films, Game of Thrones. Anyway, all these wonderful acronyms, and business models are one that just continue to be interesting to me. A lot of folks, you know, talk about buzzwords around what your business model's changing, what's the new business model. I'm really fundamental. At the end of the day, it's how do we get paid and what is the exchange of value with our customers? Just really, really fundamentally. And so historically, I think the utility viewed their entire value chain through generating, you know, producing energy and selling it volumetrically. And it was a very transactional business model. I think where we see ourselves is changing the entire paradigm and really focusing on how do we create value? What is value for our customers? And volumetric sales are not the game in the future. It's about ensuring that we're providing not only the types and sources of energy that our customers want, but providing services in a manner that help them achieve, you know, their own personal business goals and their own environmental goals, and doing all of that affordably. And so there's a lot to unpack under that on how do you make that change from a business model perspective, but at the end of the day, I think that's really what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Cris, coming from CPS, but not only there, you have a long history in the utilities market. What's your impression?
Okay, so quick introduction. My name is Cris. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at CPS Energy. We are, much like Austin, we're a municipally owned utility. We are the largest municipally owned gas and electric utility in the country. We're vertically integrated, so we have generation, nuclear, coal, gas, renewables. We've got poles and wires, and we serve the retail customer in the broader San Antonio area. Look, I would say, look, everyone knows the utility industry is changing. There's tremendous change going on. It feels like the internet in the 1990s. This is a $1 trillion industry that is just changing upon itself. New technologies, new business models, new entrants. So that no one's going to argue that. And I think the utility sector has some structural things about it that is going to keep it around a little bit longer if it doesn't embrace that change. But ultimately, if you don't change with the market or where your customers are trying to get you or want to go, you're no longer going to be relevant. You're going to be a dinosaur. You're going to fall by the wayside. So I think our view is there is a need to change for our customers. Our customers are expecting more. They're expecting more than just kilowatt hours or electrons. We at CPS Energy believe that we can help power their dreams. We can power their businesses. So whatever business they're in, we can help them achieve that and more through our services. So we have to think more broadly than just an energy player. We want to be a full service provider to our customers. And to do that, we've got to change. And that means different approaches to our business, different service models, different technologies. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But, we were going in that direction. We now got to go in that direction. And it's sometimes hard for a big utility to do that.
I know where you're coming from because our mother company is a big utility as well. And actually we have been through a lot of that pain already and the disbelief and a lot of those things. But for that, and some of you might have seen a pattern here, so asking some of the more local utilities, I'll come to Jesson next, who's got some experience in the local utilities as well, but now is, may I say, in a new business model.
Yeah, my name is Jesson Bradshaw. I'm the CEO of Energy Ogre. I've been involved in the energy space for, over 20 years, and it's been very interesting to see some of the change. And really, I understand a lot of what types of issues my two fellow panelists are talking about here. I think at the highest level, one of the interesting things that I have noticed when I started my career in sort of the early 90s was when the wholesale market was in the process of deregulating for whatever that sort of means in all the different sort of market areas that we have here. And one of the interesting things that I think is intrinsic to the electricity business is the ultimate just-in-time inventory commodity. So we try to do things like we try to make it deregulate like other types of commodities, but it's just inherently different. And I think as we start to move forward, really trying to get a lot of the process innovation and a lot of, we start looking at the advent of ISOs and efficient dispatch solutions that really root out some of the inefficiency in generation operations. It's interesting to sort of see how that's translated here when we have trying to push that in the context of the utility change, right? So it's that's what I've seen as time has sort of gone on. It's a very interesting change that's occurred because electricity is just fundamentally different, and we're pressing around the edges. We have regulators that are involved with it, telling us certain aspects that have to be protected and done in certain areas. And so it just creates ongoing change and sort of ongoing discombobulation. We laughed about this 25 years ago. Everyone told me, well, power will be like gas was. And all the good getting will be done in 5 years, and here we are all these years later, and it's still just as discombobulated, and there's still just as much chaos as there was.
Thanks, Jesson. And now, last but not least, Klaus. How about a bit of an international perspective on it?
Hi, my name is Klaus. I'm CEO of the global consulting business of Innogy that is across Europe, everywhere. We are also in the Middle East, quite present, and of course here as well in the US. And I have a second hat, is I'm responsible for the overall digital journey of our mother company of Innogy. That means we are hosting the Innovation Hub, which is in Silicon Valley, which is in Israel, which is in Berlin, doing outposts everywhere. and having all these kind of fancy words on board like agile and blockchain and all these kind of stuff. And we can probably come to that later, what is practically behind that. And at the same time, it's a huge portfolio of operational things where digitalization hits the operations and enables us to get to the next step. So this is my kind of operational role, and of course the other one as well. So coming to that part, and I can only support what I've said before, is it's all about the consumer and the customer. And that is the one and only focus which exists. Everything else, like value chains, like models, like how electrons flow, whatever, is getting very unimportant. And interestingly, what we've seen is it's not depending on regulatory things. I mean, being in Dubai for a longer time, this is the most regulated market you ever can see. It's still the full-fledged regulation. Still, they have huge efforts to innovate for several and different reasons, like we have in the US here, but they do. Europe has all kind of different legislations. Still, that kind of innovation and digitalization is everywhere the same. And looking here into the US, I would try that hypothesis that it's also kind of same issue. So for me, practically, it is about being very local, like you are here in Austin, very, very local business. And on the other side, it's completely global, platform, digital, robotics, whatever it is. And that will be the stretch. And in between is a sandwich, yeah? And probably you don't want to be into the sandwich. You have to take care about both sides, being on the one hand able to play on the global side, and on the other hand be able to be really local with your clients.
Thank you, Klaus. For me, I think we have agreement here in terms of we need to start at least adapting our business models, changing our business models here. Why don't we do it? That might be naive, but who remembers how you learned to ride a bike? What was that? Did you study that, or did you get benchmarks? How did you do it? You get on the bike and you try to ride. What happens? I fell on my nose. I think I've still got a scar here. But who did not succeed in riding a bike? So my naive question to you would be, why don't we just go and start with a new business model? What's realistically now? So what is hindering us, maybe from the regulation we have, maybe from our own companies, maybe from the past and the baggage we have with us, to move forward?
I'll start on it. That list is pretty long. I think first of all, you start from a perspective, and I don't want to get too negative here, but you start from a perspective that this is a very risk-averse industry. I mean, you fail, you get fired. I mean, so failure is something that this industry doesn't deal with well. Whereas, if you're in Silicon Valley, you fail 1,000 times, you come up with something great, and you got $1 billion venture. And so, I think understanding risk and managing that risk, I think, is key in innovation. I think also the utility sector is very good at executing. So really understanding how to execute once you have alignment with all your stakeholders, you understand the risk, I think is key. And I'll tell you some examples on that. But yeah, I think that just the whole thing about how to define success in innovation, I think, is pretty important. And you obviously have the whole regulatory factor. I've got a question to my general counsel: is if we have a new product that only a handful of our customers want to raise their hand and said, "I want that product," why can't we just price that product and sell that product to those customers versus having to go through a rate case or a tariff? So there are just a lot of things that are kind of intrinsic to the utility sector that I think limits or poses challenges to innovation. There's a whole plus side, which I'll wait for that question.
Okay, but here I could say, true, but I mean, that's probably part of our baggage that we have, being in a risk-averse industry. And obviously, if you run a nuclear plant, you really want to plan for, everything that can happen. But if we look at, and we've talked a bit about the customer, if we look at customers, they want other and new things, and I think Jesson put that out here. For them, they don't want to have everything planned right? And if we look at the consumer goods industry, how many of their products have failed ever and always? And why can't we adopt to that?
Well, I'd like to jump in here because I think Cris hit on a really important point. So has anyone truly ever lived a day without electricity in this room? Okay. Well, there's more than I thought. So I guess you didn't. So you didn't use your cell phone. You didn't use the alternator in your car. I mean, truly, think about fundamentally, electricity is one of the commodities that moves our civilization. So when we talk about, and I'm an engineer, so we are in the utility space, we are risk averse, but there is actually a fundamental reason why we have some of that risk aversion and that tie to reliability, and it comes to the fact that we recognize when our grid is unavailable, there's someone potentially in a hospital that might need that service, or a police officer, or on, and not even just to speak about the commercial side of things. You know, it's our one commodity here with electricity is something that if it's not available, society stops. And so we take that, those of us who've been utility professionals take that very seriously, and I do think that's to some degree why we are a little bit less edgy compared to Silicon Valley. If my iPhone doesn't work, the world doesn't end. But if a hospital's not energized, people's lives are impacted.
For my kids, the world ends if the iPhone doesn't work. No, but I think we'll get your point right. Okay, now let's ask the other fraction here in terms of have you planned everything out in building Energy Ogre, Jesson?
I wish that were the case. I wish I had a good crystal ball that would allow me to sort of understand what's coming down the road. You know, it's interesting you talking about utilities and innovation. You know, one of the things that I see, I think Elaina's absolutely right. There's only so many ways to skin the cat of, you know, generating electricity, distributing it, and getting it consumed. So that just sort of is what it is. What I've seen a very good job over the years is really adopting emergent technologies. And we sort of think about that, like now, the pace of all these emergent technologies, the Silicon Valley types of issues. But let's talk about combined cycle generation. You know, combined cycle generation specifically here in ERCOT, I mean, I can remember back in the early, 90s, and we had a bunch of, large gas steam generating assets, and we made a humongous amount of new generation development that occurred here in a relatively short period of time. So the GE7F technology, wasn't exactly a state of the art or foolproof when we first when that first came out, and we had root problems and all types of other things. But the industry worked through that relatively rapidly, figured out new ways to innovate, the blade designs and root, and got that pushed forward. And so we start looking at what we have today from a dispatch portfolio of resources, at least here in Texas, and that's a pretty big change. Changing the totality of your generation fleet, or what your marginal producer of electricity is a pretty amazing thing. So I do think that happens on an emergent basis, where there's adoption of technologies once they've been vetted and proven. But we all get so used to seeing these things happen so quickly that we don't oftentimes really appreciate when these things are actually occurring. For me, it's a lot more difficult. My business is one where I'm assisting customers in the deregulated environment, or in the competitive environment, as the folks and Travis much prefer for us to talk about it. But that is a business today that as we were discussing before we got in here, that is a business that's entirely set up by regulatory fiat. So the rules, that's a business that did not exist really prior to Jan 1, 2002. And so there are always changes and things that are sort of happening, and new players and new types of issues that are emergent there. So it's very difficult for us to figure out, what's coming next. You talked about the consumer side of the equation, and for us, that's sort of where we sort of hang our hat. What we're looking to do is to simplify this process as much as possible by being really consumptive focused. So how are they consuming? How easy is it for them to understand? How easy is it for them to make changes and to make better outcomes without having to invest, tens of thousands of hours becoming subject matter experts in all these things?
Klaus, you were telling us, and because you haven't been telling about, I think, Dubai or Arabia and how regulated that was. Why did they change?
Let me start with the US, because I think we have a management topic here. And when we talk about implementation, about new business models, it's starting with ourselves. It's starting with what is my expectation as a manager? How on earth do I manage both worlds? Yeah, the regulatory side, being responsible for electricity on the one hand, and on the other hand, having the same kind of responsibility to make sure that I have a way and a path defined into the future. What we did is very simple. We said, okay, at the beginning, we have to divide it. Yeah, we can't have the same management with being responsible for having the nuke ongoing, and on the other hand, saying, oh, by the way, I'm the innovative guy. It's simply not working. So we decided to outpost that and collect all the new ideas. And the first lessons, which was hard, especially also for me coming from a utility side, is you will fail. Yeah, you have a portfolio of 50 new ideas, and you have bright people in your organization. They come up with new ideas, and they get used to that feeling, I failed, and that is good. And that is necessary for me. The first step in making really new business model happening is that you have to change your culture. You have to change how you lead your company. You have to think about yourself as a manager, and that is the most hardest part. Honestly, there are so many ideas around. There are so many good, bright people in the utility industry, but also when you hire these nice data experts and whatever, and put them together in one room and say, I only open the door if you come out with a new business model, and it works. Yeah? It really works. And you have to stand as a manager in front of the door. Yeah, that is your job. But the idea is saying, okay, there is a phase where I can't put everything nicely together, everyone likes each other. No, you have to have that conflict between old staff and new staff, and out of that conflict, you will see that everything is going to move. And then the next step is that you can say, okay, I have now 100 ideas. How on earth do I lead that? How do I divide my capital? What I'm going to do? Yeah? And that is where I have my kind of experience. It's not Silicon Valley style. I don't want to copy that. Yeah, it's different because we want to be innovative, but it's energy focused, and we want to serve our clients differently. And it's not energy anymore. It's about utilities overall. That's a combination. It's home automation. It's a lot of different kind of things coming now together. You have to have these experts. You have to make them successful, and you give them a frame as a manager. And that is the most hardest job from my perspective, also for me, for myself, to allow these sometimes crazy guys to do something and then putting them in a frame again and finding out what is possible, what works, stopping, and then let it go again. So that is for me the kind of how do I practically do that? And my experience is this is the hardest job as a manager.
Is that something that resonates? I saw a lot of nods here. Or have you guys tried that out as well?
Well, yeah, I think that does resonate. I mean, I don't think it's as binary as you're saying, but I do think there are different models for different situations. I do believe that you can have your cake and eat it too. I think we can be both, to Elaina's point, responsible for keeping the lights on and innovate at the same time. But we've got to do it in a way, maybe you start as pilots, completely, a lot of people are either very fond of pilots or very, it's not fast enough or big enough, but pilots are a way for utilities to really start to innovate. You can start to test out ideas, partnerships, technologies, impact to the customer, and kind of grow on that. I'll give you one example that I'm personally very excited about is air quality sensors. So we put a smart grid infrastructure into our system, and obviously allows us to do a lot of things with our customers in terms of that capability, but it also allows us to start to get into a different space, providing air quality information to our customers. And we typically have 4 or 5, EPA certified air quality monitors. They're very expensive, very cumbersome, that are in specific parts of our city. Well, with this technology, we can put cheap sensors throughout our city. So if you're a customer, you can tell what your air quality is on your block. If you've got a child with asthma, you can tell what your air quality is in your block. And now our policymakers can start to think about, traffic congestion or, flow management. And that is something that has very little to do with the energy sector, but builds on a capability that we have. So I think thinking broadly about innovation and building on what you do and starting small and growing big, I think is key for the utilities. I wouldn't separate them, though.
Yeah. Was that hard to get through in your organization, or was that something that fell in your lap?
Fell in lap.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but
I think it was a little bit of there was a lot of skepticism. I think utilities can go a long ways by just starting to say yes. I think we can do that. I think there are a lot of folks at the utility management all the way throughout that feel like here's why you can't do something. And so what I've done with my teams is you can say no, but you've got to come up with a solution. Just don't say no and stop the conversation. Because a no sometimes is very important to Elaina's point, because there are impacts, and we do need to understand the full consequences, but you have to be solutions-focused, solutions-minded as you think about doing some of these things.
Okay. So I think that was helpful in terms of how do we remove some of those blockers, and where can we succeed also as a utility to install new business models or new approaches. And I like to ask Jesson, because basically what you did is you stepped out of the utilities and said, I can't do it there, or I want to do it on my own, and you stepped out. So what was the reason for that? Was it more the idea, or was it really, I can't change in the position or the utility I was before?
So that's a great question. I had immediately prior to forming Ogre in the previous 10 years, we actually started an independent retail electricity provider. We had a couple of those brands, and we grew those as much as we could, and I ended up selling them to one of our larger competitors in 2011. And what had really happened is I spent most of my time on the generation side historically, and got my sort of REP initiation through osmosis at the advent of the market opening in 2002. But what I did is I spent all my time looking at what were the frustrations that I had of being in the REP side of the equation. What types of issues was I really, and I'll give you a good example of that. Here, the way Senate Bill 7 lays out the consumer protection rules, it's fantastic for the consumers in Texas, okay? The bad news is that it requires a lot of actual interaction on behalf. Those customers have to advocate for themselves. And when they don't advocate for themselves, sometimes the retailer there's a bridge that's too far to gap. For example, there's no evergreen contract. So you can't sign somebody up and then just have it roll over. So if someone neglects to make a decision, that's sort of a decision. And oftentimes there's bad outcomes associated with that. There's a more efficient outcome where someone says, I need to hedge the next year. I need to hedge these next periods of time. So part of what we were looking at was this market had become so complicated for the average consumer to look at all these different rate programs that are out there and available. What I was talking about before is really integrating emergent technologies. For us, if I tried to build Ogre in 2006, there's no way I could have done it, because the cost for computing power, the cost to store the data that we deal with today, it's just not possible. So a lot of it had to do with it being the right time at the right place, and us allowing some of these things to sort of catch up with where the industry as a whole had gone.
So you need to have that radar and look at the opportunities and what of supporting or emerging technology is helping potentially new business models.
Right, and that is for us the biggest piece of our equation is we are constantly looking at what is forthcoming, what aspects of data are available, how can we pull that information in without being Google or Facebook, how can we pull that information in and make it something that has better outcomes for these customers, right? There's so many very interesting things. I've been involved in the energy business all over. We had generation in California and in Illinois and New York, and And Texas is always interesting to me because of us being a little bit of our own little closed system here, and it is very much a crucible, I think, for, as we were discussing beforehand, I think of everything that is potentially forthcoming over a long enough timeline in the rest of the country. So I'm really trying to figure out how can I make these things work here, what things are unique to Texas, what other data, what other sort of operational realities are there in other parts of the country. So how do we integrate these technologies in our core business?
Yeah, let me follow up on that. Yes, it's about new technologies, definitely. Otherwise, we would not be able to think about new business models. And I would like to follow up on that kind of testing. I think testing is one of the most important things. Testing, failing, testing, and hopefully at the end success. We found out it's simply not fast enough. The competitors are much faster. So what we do is we create optionalities. So we have, like your business, we have 6 online platforms up and running for retail. Not because we are bad managers, but we believe in the best one will win. And that is also a kind of shift in how we manage. Yes, you allow simply internal competition. So we have our legacy systems, which are classically the regulator approved, whatever. Yeah, that is one thing. And we have all these kind of more startup versions with different kind of focus. Yeah, and the one is more focusing on purely commodity play, energy, only gas and electricity. The other one is saying, oh no, I am the service guy. Yeah, and the next one is saying, I'm also doing commodity, and I combine that with services. And we are testing different kind of customer needs with that, not knowing, and no crystal ball, honestly. I have it also not available. Yeah, I would love to. But we need to test different versions. And that is, from a capital intensity, of course, difficult. But it's a kind of way of getting speed. And speed is something when it comes to being agile, being more design thinking, where you test and really fail, but you have to prove in the market with the customer different versions. And that is for me also very practically one thing which is happening, and I see that happening here as well, that you have simply to opt in and opt out different versions, yeah? And it will happen also with the predictive maintenance. Yeah, I know, and I love my guys from Siemens and from GE, but these kind of overall platforms, yeah, will not be the only ones. Yeah? There is always a kind of best solution and not decided yet on what it will be. So it's still possible for us as utilities to step in and found our way through. It's simply necessary to be very innovative and being aware that that needs speed, and it needs a huge speed. Otherwise, the others who are coming into our business are simply faster. And speed is something I fully underestimated in the last years. And now this is one of our focus things. It's all about very sprints, 1, 2, 3 sprints. After 3 sprints, no market access, gone. So it's really like that kind of pipeline to make sure that business models work and not theoretical and nicely on PowerPoint. Yeah? And you talk, you're in the board, and the board is saying, oh, I like the idea, intellectually I know what they're talking about, but nothing happens in the market. Yeah? So it's all about route to market and speed to market from my perspective.
Well, the way I see that, just sort of to follow up, I mean, that's one thing that I've had to battle with in a lot of the startup kind of environment that I'm dealing with is everyone wants to be a vendor to you. Oh, I hear you're doing this. Let me tell you about the next thing. And you have to be very careful not have a staff of consulting people. So it reminds me of that very old, not that there's anything wrong with consulting people, but there's like that old IBM commercial where they have all those guys together and they put together this whiz-bang plan. They say, okay, well, now go make it happen. Oh, we don't do that. We just come up with ideas, you know. So there is huge value of having the background in the industry to say, this is practical. Yeah. You know, an idea has to be implementable, right? There have to be practicalities within the confines of the organizational structure, within the confines of what's happening in the regulatory environment, within the confines of what the customers will understand. So there's a huge part to play with the folks that have the relevant subject matter expertise in the industry.
And if I can jump in here, the utility is not going to own and be all parts to all people, right? We, by our nature, have traditionally been more conservative, more focused on reliability. So I think it's about creating partnerships and working with proven folks that can have speed to market. I think a lot of utilities get wrapped around, well, it's a thing that I put behind the meter, and who's going to own it, and what's the regulatory? We got to get past all of that. Know that we will figure that out. But at the end of the day, what is value in the eyes of the customer? And then figuring out, all right, how best can you position your organization to support or deliver that value? But that may be through another person, and that's okay.
So I'm hearing two things where I'm really interested in. The one thing is partnership. I think, Cris, you started that. So that's a question I'm holding. And please, the audience, I think we're in the last 10 minutes here. Give us some feedback on where the last 10 minutes of the discussion should be going. So is partnerships the right model to go forward to start changing a business model? Or is it just buying somebody? Yeah, like it's at least the utility world I'm coming from. If you had a good idea, you go and buy somebody that already did it, so you don't have to do it yourself, right? Typically that meant that, at least in the world I'm coming from, that you sunk a lot of money and it didn't really work because you're probably crushing them with love. And so is it partnering, or is it buying, or is it do it yourself in terms of what Klaus was saying? Because, I mean, doing something yourself when we're talking about riding a bike is getting through the experience and getting that experience. What's your take on that?
I'll get things started again here. I think partnerships are definitely a key part of this. When I look at our successes, it's been with partners in, out of the technology sector, local partners. If we do a deal, whether it's a big solar deal or energy efficiency deal, one of the requirements we have, even if it's an outside entity, is that they put some skin in the game into San Antonio. So they locate there, their engineers are there, so they're not flying in and having sort of a product development workshop, once every couple weeks, then flying back out, that they're really truly partners with us. And so that is very important, that not only are they technology partners, but they fit the fabric of our community, and they're part of where we're trying to take our community. So partnerships is key for us. We do have a relationship with universities, with EPRI, some of the more typical when you think about research and innovation, but technology partners are key for us. Consultants coming in with new ideas, innovative ideas. So everyone, I think, has a role to play in this. And I think the utility is really kind of at the center of this in terms of bringing those ideas to market.
I think Cris hit a really good point about partnerships. I'd say it's, for us at Austin Energy, it's partnerships, but it's also platforms, and it's also co-development. And so partnerships are key. I'll use our advanced distribution management system. I think we were the first utility in the world to deploy the Schneider ADMS, and great platform, but we have some really smart folks who have developed some sophisticated algorithms to continually solve for volt VAR optimization and CVR in the platform, and it's actually become part of their package. And so we have almost half of our feeders right now in this moment solving for the lowest energy, right? And there aren't any humans involved, right? And so I think it's a combination of making sure that you're selecting good platforms. Another example, a lot of folks wanted to have integrated home management systems and own everything all the way to the consumer. We decided to just have an open ADR platform, and everyone can bring their own BYOT, bring your own thermostat. And that works for us. Customers want to have the choice of what their end device is. And really for us, we want to be able to help them manage energy and call for conservation events. So it's kind of an all of the above for us.
To me, that's a big key when you talk about partnerships is, for me, at least in what I do and what I deal with, a lot of times they're very sort of cutting edge types of things where we're talking about data and how do we access it and how do we bifurcate it. And we have to be very careful. I don't have folks like Schneider quite the same. So for us to align ourselves with somebody else, we have to be very thoughtful about what is that going to mean 2 months from now, 2 years from now. Are these the right players to align with? Because oftentimes there may be some competitive issues around that, exclusivity and things of that nature. So for me, some of that's I have to be very, very circumspect about those partnerships. Just there's a lot of follow-on issues that we have to contend with.
Yeah, for me, it's simply impossible to do everything on your own. Yeah, it's simply not possible. The speed is too high. The innovation outside is quite intense. So you can't believe that you can reinvent everything on your own. So you need to go into partnerships. But it's still for me very important that you're in the driver's seat. Yeah, so that you define for yourself as a manager, what is the core I'm standing for? What is the innovation part? What is the digitalization? What do I want to do with robotics? I'm still believe it's also kind of, you probably remember our kind of outsourcing discussion. Yeah, do we outsource procurement or whatever, yeah, or payroll, whatever. And at the end, you have to have the knowledge to control the outsourcing partner. It's here exactly the same. You have to have the understanding inside. What does innovation mean? What does digitalization mean? What is a new business model? Will it be successful, yes or no? And you have to define that where HR is getting utmost important to attract young, new talents who are then like to work for you, yeah? Finding a tip to be in the utility rather than in Silicon Valley. It is as it is. So you have to change your whole kind of style, image, brand image, to make sure that you get these kind of new core done. And that means, again, starting with yourself, being different in management and with your image, and then finding the right partners, yeah? And honestly also ending partnerships, which found is sometimes even harder again than, oh, I have a portfolio of partners, and but it doesn't work, yeah? And then stop it, and start new ones. So it's for me also a very ongoing process.
I have like 15 more questions for you, but as I said, I wanted to do that a bit more interactive here. Do we have something pressing from the audience where you would like to ask our panelists? Please.
I think the two issues of partnership and risk sort of merge because a utility generally has a very low cost of capital because it is a low risk business. And therefore the question is, how do I keep up with innovation in a utility while keeping my risk low enough to keep low cost capital to keep prices down? So we get very used to specifying things in the future. And we've got to move to that different sort of model where we're actually specifying what a future looks like and how we then work with partners. So I'd probably like to know a little bit more about how you could keep that capital down, keep the risk down, but being part of that innovative future.
Direct answer. It's unrealistic that the level of full-fledged low risk can be kept. You have to take some risk, but you have to manage it. So it's all about how do I manage a portfolio of more risky things, and how do I manage it from a financial perspective, from a, what we had here in our session, more a kind of route to market perspective. But yes, financial-wise, it is a different kind of, the CFO has a completely different role. Yeah, how you value startups, how you value small acquisitions is completely different than the normal style. You value your RAB or your regulated asset base or whatever. So you have to have both sides again in your portfolio. And of course, you have to reduce the risk in the innovation part. That's for sure. To keep up to your dividend play or your kind of shareholder expectation. But if you don't do it, it simply will decrease. Yeah, so that's also not an alternative.
I'll take just a quick, part of that is we're working with you guys to help figure that out, that future. So, but I think at a higher level, it's the data analytics, I think, that helps us with that. Because if we can figure out what's going on in terms of keeping our risk profile low, which is our capital light low risk profile, and having a superior kind of return on an innovation, data analytics is kind of what helps us. And when we talk about working together, one of the things that we're looking at is kind of the LiDAR data, which is imaging your whole infrastructure. But if you can predict where that next outage is before it happens, okay, and that's data analytics and technology, that allows you to do something for the customer, reduce your costs, remove risk, and innovate. And so, to me, that's the key. It's the data analytics. That's the key to crack that code.
Well, and one kind of overarching theme is those who don't innovate or contemplate these potentially fundamental changes in our business model, that low cost of capital may not matter in the future.
Can we take, I'm looking at the clock, and Alejandro, can we take 2 more questions? Okay, please.
Having negotiated utility partnerships before, it's easy to get into and hard to get out of. One thing you should mention and talk about is the prenuptial, that how do you unwind partnerships when companies' views diverge because management changes or whatever.
Yeah, thank you. It's, I think, a great point on prenuptials for the utility partnerships. I think
I'll pass on that one.
I think in the end it's a question of trust and love, huh? All right. I'm getting a sign here that's a wrap. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, my fantastic panel group here. Elaine, Jesson, Cris, and Klaus.